Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bald Move Prestige. Today we're talking about the 2020 movie directed by Charlie Kaufman and a screenplay also by Charlie Kaufman based on a novel, same title as the movie, I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is the movie I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I'm Thinking of Ian Reid by Ending Things. Jim, this is a hell of a movie to talk about, especially on a one shot. We seen it one time. We try to figure out what to say about it. What do you got? What do you got?
It's a Charlie Kaufman movie. Like if you've seen Eternal Sunshine or Being John Malkovich or Adaptation, all of those movies are, you know what to expect kind of going into this movie. I'm, I guess the thing that I'm coming away from this movie with is, something that I've always felt watching Charlie Kaufman movies, but something I've never really tried to pin down and understand what's
Uh-huh.
happening is like the tension he builds through just purely like mundane circumstances and like ennui. It's like this
Mm-hmm.
boredom and this fear and this hopelessness that's just kind of there in the atmosphere of his films and is
Yeah.
never like it is actually commented on in this movie, but it never feels like he's trying to push you into that. It's more just like that's what is there, and the
Yeah.
tension that comes from that feeling just escalates throughout the entire film to where I'm always looking for the other shoe to drop, and even if there's no shoe dropping, even if there's no first shoe, it always just feels like there's something big that's weighing on me while I'm watching his movies. And in this case, it's the hopelessness, I think, of life, right?
Yeah.
And Charlie Kaufman's kind of, I think, saying it is what it is, and it's fine, you know.
Yeah. No, you're right. That kind of like ennui, that hopelessness, that existential dread is like gnawing at the edge of almost every frame of this movie.
Yeah.
One thing I should have thrown out here is it's got some stars that are appealing or might appeal to certain Bald Move fan communities. For example, Jesse Plemons, who we first got to know as Meth Damon on Breaking Bad, and then maybe unfortunately Fat Damon on
Yeah.
later seasons of Fargo. Jesse Buckley, who I haven't seen in much before, who did a really good job as hell. I don't even know what you could properly call her, which we'll
Sure.
get into. Tony Collette, who plays Jesse's dad, or Jesse's mom rather, who's done a lot of phenomenal work. I first saw her as the mom in The Sixth Sense,
Okay.
and I last saw her losing her fucking mind in Hereditary.
Huh.
And it also stars David Thewlis, who we last knew in season 3 of Fargo as just a truly disgusting villain with the worst teeth I've ever seen and breath.
Hmm.
Um, this movie is. I'm gonna list a couple possibilities, 4 or 5 possibilities of what this movie could be about. They're not spoiler. This movie could be about a horror story featuring ghosts haunting a young man and woman.
Okay.
This
Hmm.
movie might be about a man's final thoughts as he's freezing to death,
Hmm.
reflecting on his life's relationships and how they've changed over time and his regrets. This movie might be about a relationship that's too good to stay in, but too bad to stay in, but too good to live with.
Hmm.
This movie might be about a woman who's thinking of reasons not to kill herself.
Hmm.
It could be about all of those things or none of those things. And it was these views I kind of like was shifting through like a kaleidoscope as I watched this movie. And I didn't kind of come to a final determination until the last few frames about what I personally thought. But it has all of those elements. Like there's a lot of this movie that's shot like a spook film. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of this movie, especially a lot of the middle part of it that feels like a much better version of the movie Mother. You
Okay.
know, this
Hmm.
this very symbolic, very thematic, very not literally what's happening kind of movie. But I don't know. It just seems to be very polarizing. It's got a mid 80s review on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a sub 50% on the audience score. And when I tweeted about watching it this weekend, I got about 50-50 people saying, oh, yeah, Charlie Kaufman, really interesting, very absorbing, to like, I fucking hate this pretentious piece of shit film.
Yeah.
This movie is up its ass, its own ass. This movie is sniffing its own farts. And to be fair, I really like this movie, but it's at least 20% up its own ass, at least. Yeah. But I found it's very much like a fusion of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind fused with like Kaufman's other film, Synecdoche, New York City.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Or New York, rather. Because Synecdoche is all about this guy's kind of like life and his regrets, and it's constantly changing in like time period and perspective. With Eternal Sunshine's preoccupation, a singular preoccupation with the relationship, and what went wrong, what went right, whether you can rekindle those things. And it's that kind of, nostalgic in the Don Draper, painful memory kind of way that the Eternal Sunshine is. But it's a hell of a movie, and it's a hell of an experience to watch, and I've been thinking about it a lot in the last 48 hours since I've seen it. It's another one of those movies that like I probably should have just watched it again, but it's kind of like cheating on a first run bald movie. But it does cry out for a second watch to kind of like sit to see if like my interpretations hold up to another watching of it.
I don't know if I can handle a second watch of this right now. Like we're in the throes of a pandemic here, and
it's really
I feel
melancholy.
Like it's borderline irresponsible for Netflix to put this out right now. Because, like, I don't recommend watching this movie if you are feeling down about the situation, the global situation.
If you're thinking of ending things, for example,
yeah, it's not going to help with that feeling for sure. And I know that I've been feeling that. So there have to be a lot of people out there who this is not the right time to watch this movie. Maybe they are Charlie Kaufman fans. Maybe give it a little while. I'm not saying like, oh, Netflix shouldn't have put this out right now. I'm just saying, maybe keep this one in your back pocket for less rainy days.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's thematically, it'd be a hell of a film to watch in a dark, dreary, winter day.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's got a lot of that kind of aesthetic built into it. We haven't really talked about spoilers much. Do we want to? Have we said enough about what we think about this movie? I mean, to be clear, like I said, I liked it. I think that 80%, 80% score on Rotten Tomatoes feels about right. That, and a 50% audience score feels about right for, like if 80% if you are a critic or aspire to be a critic or you like shit like this. Below 50% if you, kind of don't traffic in some of this up its own ass, smelling its own farts type of cinema. If you haven't seen any of those, like, Kaufman films that we've rattled off, if you hate John Malkovich, you're probably not going to find much you enjoy here. But otherwise, let's go ahead and talk about spoilers for this film.
Okay.
I want to open off by saying that this film cultivates a weird atmosphere, and it starts really early on. There's this long car ride towards this guy's parents' house where you're not sure if they're doing this thing where Jake, the guy played by Jesse Plemons, can hear this young woman's inner monologue. Like they play with that. When she starts reciting this poem, the camera goes an extreme angle outside of the car, and she makes deliberate eye contact with the audience. Just a lot of weird things like that set up this unsettling mood. And then things get like weirder and weirder when you get to the parents' house. You got a dog that's acting like, I don't know, a character from a David Cronenberg film.
Sure. It's only ever shown when it's shaking the water off of itself, right? And it does it for abnormally long amounts of time.
It's like a Marilyn
not around
Manson video.
until you think about it, and then it comes around. And they do a lot of weird stuff with like, along the lines of that. Can he hear the thoughts? They always interrupt her thoughts with something happening or something threatening to happen. Like they'll arrive somewhere just as she's getting up the courage to say something to him about what she's thinking, or when she's thinking a particularly in a particular way, he will interrupt her with a question or something. There's always that tinge of like, did he do that because he understood what she was thinking or heard what she was thinking, or did he do that because there was an unnatural break in the conversation and he wanted to just fill the void?
And on top of all this early going, every once in a while they'll just cut to this old man who's a janitor at a local high school, apparently, you know, cleaning the floors, looking at a you know, school play that's being rehearsed, just kind of like
they're
going
kind
about
of
their
hearing
business
on the radio at the same time. There's a lot of bleed through of like what other people are hearing into their lives. And things taking place like on television into the real world and vice versa.
Did you think that, you see what I'm saying about like it's shot like a spook film where, you know, the film lingers on someone off frame, and then it pans over into an empty frame, and people like I kept on looking at the background and the foreground, waiting to see like a pair of eyes or something weird kind of happening.
Especially when they get to the house and the living room scenes and time starts shifting.
Yeah, and like there's someone upstairs, but like they're never coming down, and you're like wondering what's going to happen. He gives this tour of the farm where these pigs died in a maggot pit, and he says life's not always pretty on a farm. And then when you finally meet the parents, like, okay, these are actually real people, probably not ghosts, but they act like this dinner scene is one of the weirdest, most off-putting, awkward dinner scenes since, you know, Skylar and Walter White having
Jesse over,
another Jesse over for dinner, where he says these peas are choice. And then it devolves into like she has to leave. She has to be back in town the next day. She can't spend the night. She's made this is where the mother influence came, where, you know, Jennifer Lawrence kept on saying, "Why are these people in my house? I don't want these people in my house. I'm worried about XYZ, the baby coming. Why are these people in my house?" And yet more people just keep showing up and putting her in danger. You know, this poor woman just wants to get home. There's a blizzard outside. Jesse Plemons is always
the chains, man.
I got the chains. I got to feed my mom. But then like David Thewlis and Toni Collette keep getting older and older.
Until they get younger.
And
that other horror part is the basement. Like, what are they doing with the basement? And there's a big question about scratches on the door and what's down there.
And when she goes down there, it is shot and framed like a conventional horror film. And I thought, oh, finally, we're going to get some fucking answers. I found out in my research that this book that it's based on is considered psychological horror.
Okay.
Very much in the same vein as like The House. What is that? A book about the House of Leaves or something, where you're never quite sure if there's something spooky going on or whether someone's going crazy, losing their minds. And what I heard is that in the adaptation that Kaufman kind of removed a lot of the horror elements and inserted more kind of like the psychological, you know, just pondering on relationships and stuff. And as a result, it has a lot of this kind of horror aesthetics where it feels like it's going to build up to some twist ending that, oh, the janitor's a ghost and he's actually been thinking about all the people he's seen, or that Jake is a ghost and or the lady's a ghost. I mean, I don't know. I had like multiple people I thought was the ghost throughout this whole thing, and it turns out, as far as I can tell, the only solid ghost in the whole film is a pig, a cartoon pig.
Yeah, but he's also leading the janitor down this hall, and I get the sense that like that's the end for the janitor. Like, and so he might be a ghost in that scene too. I'm not sure.
There's a lot of other things that are subtly wrong about the film, like the fact that this woman keeps getting different names, and she gets phone calls from people who she has had this name, like she's got like 6 different names by the time this film is over.
Mhm.
The photos, when she looks at the photos, it looks like it's a photo of her, and then it switches into a photo of Jesse Plemons.
Yeah, the
There's a
photos
bunch of
in Jake's house, the ones that should be of him that he claims are of him. She's seeing herself in them.
yeah. Yeah. And then there's a lot of just surreal elements in this film. For example, in the middle of this film, another film breaks out starring Ashley from The Boys out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and ends in a credit sequence that's directed by Robert Zemeckis, and then the movie keeps going.
And her name's Colby Minifie, I think is how you say that. Vaughn is the character in the TV show. She shows up in the car later on, right? Like transposed with Lucy. I'm going to call her Lucy. I don't know what her real name is.
Yeah.
But, Jesse Buckley's character. It just swapped out with her for like 2 sentences, and then she's back.
Yeah, I noticed that Jessie Buckley's always credited in the subtitles as a young woman because I wonder what she was actually credited for in the credits, because I watched the credit sequence. Did you watch the whole credit sequence? Because there's continuing things happen. This is where, because I watched all the way through and I'm like, is this where it's going to turn into a fucking ghost story? Finally, at the very end, they're going to be something, and it doesn't. But it's kind of like how you talked about how the Homeland episodes, was it Homeland or Homecoming? Homecoming,
yeah.
Where things keep happening and this emotional kind of palette continues to be painted, and you do like the foreground goes blurry, but you can still hear like it sounds like someone. I thought it sounded like someone was like every couple minutes trying to start a car, like turning over a car that's been left on overnight. And then the show, like the very end of it, there's like machinery that kind of starts up. At the very end of it, snaps back to crystal clear. And I thought I'd see like a body in the ground, but no, there's no change, and it just goes away.
It's just like the truck covered in snow, right?
Yeah, no new information. That too is weird. And then the entire third act continues to do these crazy fourth wall breaking things. Like, for example, you've got this thing where a La La Land style dance number breaks out to like the themes of Oklahoma. Then shot for shot remake of the end of A Beautiful Mind happens, where Jesse Plemons is dressed up like John Nash and he's given this moving speech to Jesse Buckley. You've got then after that he actually sings a number from Oklahoma. And then the animated pig shows up. And even before that, you had this like animated, this weird, bizarre sequence of them stopping for ice cream at this place with an animated commercial. So what do you think? What do you think this film is actually about?
I mean, I think it's about a lot of things, but one of the major things it's about is the pointlessness and hopelessness of life. Like, we're all destined for the same place, right? And no matter what we do during our life, that's not going to change. And I feel like Charlie Kaufman gets so caught up in that idea that it overwhelms a little bit. And certainly that's a reasonable response to the idea of like the inevitability of death, but also it's a pretty bleak one. And it's not one that I ascribe to, but like I think that's ultimately what it's about, like the hopelessness and pointlessness of a life that is going to end. Because this whole movie feels very much like an aging man contemplating like paths not taken. It almost feels like a multiverse film in that way, like the paths not taken, the paths that were taken, how those things affect the future or whatever potential future is left. All that is in there. It's just he doesn't have a very cheery outlook on it all.
Yeah, I do think what this movie is literally about, and I could change my mind with other viewings and reading 50,000 word essays on it, but I think it's really about this old man who freezes to death one night And
Yeah,
in
yeah.
his dying moments, he is thinking back about all of his relationships, the important relationships in his life, his mother, his father, all of his lovers, even career things. And they're all fused into this one thing that becomes more and more detached from reality as he gets further and further along in the dying process, until this
Yeah.
pig, like one of his early memories of life on a farm when he's a young child trying to understand this pointless death that these pigs go through, and this pig comes back to usher him into the next life, and he says, like,
Yeah.
somebody's got to be the pig that dies with a belly full of maggots, and it just happens to be you this time.
Hmm.
And I think that's why the woman changes identity so many times, because you're supposed to understand that these are all the different relationships that never quite worked out. The fact that he was kind of like this brilliant guy who went to college for physicists, I don't know if that's like what he wanted or thought he was capable of, or he got sidetracked because his parents got ill and he had to take care of him, and then he kind of Walter Whited himself. Like, Walter White is this famous, not famous, but brilliant chemist, the bright future ahead, gets his wife pregnant, and then decides to take a detour. But I think that's the interpretation I think will hold up. That these are all just the last thoughts of a dying man who is contemplating a life more full of regrets than full of like possibilities and happy things.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and that
agree.
explains why Jesse Plemons can kind of hear the woman's thoughts, because he's looking at these relationships with the foreknowledge that they don't work out. The things came to an end, and he's like trying to listen really carefully for the points where those went wrong. Like, where is the point where this woman decided I'm not worth the trouble anymore? Why did she
Yeah.
make that choice?
And I think at times, Jake might even be the Lucy character, like especially when
mm,
she's in his home and she's seeing herself in his old photos. Like, there may be a bleeding over of the two between, like, oh, this is at times what could have been, like, what if he was born a female? What if he,
hmm
was born someone who is more attractive, right? Or less prone to like binge eating, which I think is part of this, like drowning himself in sugar or whatever, and being made fun of in high school. Like, all of that kind of is there, and I don't think Lucy, that character, like is ever one thing. I think she's a lot of different things. It's past
mm.
relationships, like you said, that could have been, or that might have gone somewhere, but it's also at times, I think, himself.
That's interesting, because like I guess that in the original book, that's the big psychological reveal, is that the female character that you have been primarily seeing everything happen turns out to be
Okay,
essentially morphs into the old man janitor character who's thinking about his life.
gotcha.
Um,
I have not
and
read the
that
book,
makes
and I will say I don't get
no,
99%
me
of the
either.
references in this movie. Like, they're
Oh yeah,
they're
there's
films I haven't seen, and poems I haven't read, and books I haven't read.
and one is just a word for word review, like a 1960s like piece of film criticism by this famous L.A. Times writer.
Yeah, Pauline Kael,
Um,
I think is her name.
yeah. But I feel like that there's a lot of this where I interpret it as like intense empathy on the case of Jake, because like just like he becomes the girl that ultimately rejects him at certain times of the film. There's also this thing where they go to the ice cream stand, and
Yeah,
they're served by this shy girl that maybe he had a fascination with, because she was different from the other girls, but she has this like really bad case of psoriasis on her arms. And when Jesse, like, there's this just really brief shot where he's handing money to her, and he has the same kind of lesions on his arm,
yeah,
and I don't think he literally did, but it's almost like he is thinking about her and what she's going through and why, and
yeah.
be kind of like taking her affect onto him to kind of process all those things.
Yeah, and he was, he was the loser in high school. He was the kid that people made fun of and were cruel to, and that's reflected even in like the dance number, right? Toward the end, like that's the what if, right? Like, what if I was, famous, or I was popular and I was attractive in high school, and like all those things. That's kind of the what if in that scenario, but I don't even know how to interpret that, because it doesn't end well, right? Like, in the dance number, like, she's stolen off the altar, as best I can tell, by this janitor who sweeps her away, and then he goes to try and win her back and dies in the process. So like,
That's like literally what happens in Oklahoma. You got this guy who's trying to
oh, is
win a
it? Okay,
girl, and
see, another
then he
reference
ends up
I
getting
don't
murdered
know.
by yeah.
Okay, so
But there's
that's even more confusing. Weird.
yeah. I mean, there's this movie is constantly has this stuff where it mixes very profound statements. Like there's this one thing they said that other animals live in the present, but humans cannot, so they invented hope, which I thought like, Jesus, that's going to stick with me for a while. But then the stuff that's just utterly banal that's mixed in, like, some of this comes across, some of this is so advanced, but some of it comes across as like a student who's taken 101 philosophy and is writing down a thought that they're sure is like a organic, unique thought. And a lot of people are dragging the film for that, like it's seemingly pretentiousness, but some of it's surface level pretension. But are we sure that's not intentional? Because I think they're painting Jake as this type of character who, has this Dunning-Kruger effect where it's like, yeah, if I had played my cards right, I could have been a nuclear physicist and dated all. Like, it could be that these are his organic thoughts. Like, and I saw one interpretation of like this long, or this wasn't this was Andy Kaufman, or not Andy, Charlie Kaufman's interpretation, where he said he threw in this scene of this girl, this female critic eviscerating this film as a stand-in for every time he's liked something, and then he read something from a person smarter than him tearing it apart and felt like a jackass for liking it. Like,
okay,
Jake really admires this film, and his girlfriend, through the lens of this critic, just takes it down and makes him feel like an idiot for even liking it. And like that's like something about his insecurities and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always entertaining. Like it kind of reminded me of like what we say about the weather in the Midwest. If you don't like it, wait 15 minutes and it'll change. Like this, if you don't like what kind of film this is, wait 15 minutes and it'll transform. And now it's La La Land, and I particularly liked this guy dying and throwing out the red scarves of the spurts of blood, and I was like, man, is this going to be foreshadowing? And I thought, like, because there's so much stuff that obviously is not truly happening, like the ice cream stand visit, and he goes and he tries to make out with his girlfriend, and he says that this old guy is seeing him, but I thought during this, I'm like, oh, there's actually a chance that I'm seeing a dramatization of what's actually happened. He went to go challenge this guy. They got in a fight. Someone got killed. And we're going to shift into, like, I don't know, some kind of actual Fargo mode with a real grisly murder. Nope. Still just the old guy dying in the snowbanks as far as I can tell. But
yeah, and I mean, it just gets weirder from there. It's like it ends with this this verbatim homage to Beautiful Mind. It's not even homage, right? It is the
just plagiarizes
Nobel Prize acceptance speech from A Beautiful Mind.
Yep.
With like some, and I don't know if they're doing the makeup stuff there to just poke fun at how kind of bad the makeup is, the old person makeup is in Beautiful Mind, because it is kind of bad. But yeah, it's strange, right? It's not literal. He's not winning a Nobel Prize for anything. This is another what if, I guess. Like if his diligence had turned into, if he had been more successful, I don't even know.
But see, that's the thing, is his childhood bedroom is full of these books and like DVD cases of these highfalutin movies, and Beautiful Mind was prominently pictured. So it's almost like, is he just cycling through, like, as the last vestiges of his consciousness lead his body, he's just kind of like reduced to remixing things from popular culture?
Well, that's an Andy,
better, more profound versions of his own thoughts. Which, yeah, you're about to say that's kind of a Charlie Kaufman thing.
It is, yeah. If you look at adaptation, that's a movie that like wraps back in on itself, where like it's a script writer trying to write a script that is exciting and feeling like a hack the whole time doing it, and then his brother's got this script that is exciting, and by the end of the movie has turned into that script. It's bizarrely connected, but feels like super satisfying in a strange, ephemeral way. And this movie, I feel, has a little bit of that going on in the end. And especially because the entire time, like you mentioned, they slip into this mode where it's a movie critic giving a giving a verbatim critique of this film that I haven't seen, but then there's a lot about spectacle and how that bleeds into our lives and changes us. The things we see on television or movies, those fantasies turn us into different people and thereby become real. It's got a lot of that weird Charlie Kaufman spectacle DNA in it that I find incredibly interesting, if not understandable.
Yeah. I also find that it has a lot of this kind of defensive critique stuff to it. Like, I feel like David Thewlis's father is the 50% of people that think this movie sucks.
Yeah.
And he's like, look at this beautiful painting. Well, how am I supposed to feel about it? There's nothing in here that I can relate to. Like, if I was in this film, and this fact that he cannot get that, like, hey, if you see a beautiful sunrise, that stirs something in your heart. And I'm trying to like these landscapes. And as she says, it's like I'm going for more of like an emotional tone. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's like Andy Kaufman's response to people who just like, I don't fucking get it. How am I supposed to relate to this character? What the hell is even going on? Like, it's just a landscape, man. This is a particularly bleak existential crisis one. Can you not relate to feeling this way? And if so, then pat yourself on the back and consider yourself lucky, because I sure as shit can.
There's always something.
But I also, here's the thing.
Yeah.
As a 22, 23-year-old man, I saw being John Malkovich, and I fucking hated it. I hated it so much. Because it was pretentious. It was up its own ass. It didn't make sense. It's got all these weird thoughts about being middle-aged and life passing you by, and that shit didn't apply to me, man. I had the bull by the horns, and I was twisting that fucker for all I could. I bet, and I've never gone back and seen that movie. I bet 20 years later, if I saw that, I bet John Malkovich is a much more profound experience for me, because I've had those experiences to allow me to put me into that scene. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is, I imagine if people see this and like it, because it's on Netflix, got Netflix, you might as well watch it. If you see this and like it, I recommend going through all of Kaufman's filmography, because they're all like of this piece. Mm-hmm. They're not all exactly the same, but like it, and a lot of people like Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, love it.
That is a very mainstream version of what Kaufman's trying to do here. Synecdoche is like an uncut heroin version of what he's trying to do here. And a little bit maybe more focused, because it's clearly about a character and his relationships and how they change. Like, it's explicitly about this, but a lot of the same visual metaphor of like people showing up and they're much younger, much older. Everything's very stream of consciousness kind of a thing. It's a lot like that. And then, of course, being John Malkovich is all about inhabiting another person's perspective and how intoxicating that can be.
So I spent some time trying to reconcile something last night, because these movies, like all the ones you mentioned, are uncomfortably close for me to David Lynch territory, which I notoriously dislike David Lynch anything. I've seen Blue Velvet. I've seen, what is it, Mulholland Drive.
I actually have a note. The final bullet point is ask Jim about David Lynch, because I'm like, if you like this, what the fuck?
I'm coming to a reckoning where I'm going to have to reconsider. I'm going to have to sit down and figure out what it is that I don't like about David Lynch, because I think he leans farther into this. Like, there's always something
I agree.
Entertaining, something grounding in a Charlie Kaufman film that I can latch onto. Whereas in a David Lynch film, I feel adrift the entire time. This has like a lot of that DNA in it, though, I would say.
Oh, yeah. Like, if this movie is like a very bleak wintertime Bob Ross painting, David Lynch is like an impressionist version of that.
The abstract
version of that. Yeah, where it's just colors and shapes. There's no trees or water features or cabins, late game cabins. It's just swirls, and the sun's turning into the head of a bull, and who the fuck even knows. It's like, like one even more step removed from narrative structure or whatnot. It could be because I was like, I was like, as I told Cesar, this is 50-50. Jim might hate this because this is really fucking Lynchian.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
I will
yeah.
say it is more Lynchian than a lot of Kaufman's movies. Like adaptation absolutely has a lot of grounding.
Oh
It's got a
yeah. Oh
plot.
yeah.
It's got story.
It's funny too. Like there's the other thing is
Yeah.
like there is nothing funny about this, right? I mean,
Uh, some
some
of
of
the dinner
the
scene, the stuff at the parents' house, I thought was kind of funny in places.
in a very kind of awkward, socially awkward way.
Yeah.
The smash cut to like the Robert Zemeckis film, I did laugh out loud at
Okay.
more from just how bizarre and audacious it was than
Yeah.
like any genuine sense of mirth. But adaptation's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
There's
Nicolas
some
Cage
stuff in
is
Synecdoche
incredible in
that's
that movie.
really this oh man, who's the award I still sometimes think of who's the Oscar winning, like
Meryl
she's got
Streep.
the most Oscars. Yeah, Meryl Streep's acting when she's taking this orchid drug is still cracks, like her brushing her teeth and slowly the reality skewing is still some of the funniest performances I've ever seen in my life.
I like the guy whose name I can't ever
yeah.
remember. The fuckfish guy.
Oh yeah. But this film doesn't have a lot like any ha-has really at all. There's a couple things that you might laugh at because of what the fuck. The ice cream commercial might do one of those things for you, but mostly it's just
the
stark.
genus genius joke was actually pretty good.
But it was a very intensely uncomfortable situation. Like he's picking this fight with his mom, making this, I don't know what the hell her name's, Lucia, Lucius, Ames, making her intensely uncomfortable. And I don't know. But I don't know. Like I said, the of the Bald movies we've reviewed, this shares a lot of like that Mother DNA, and just like it, I felt like this is a more successful version of Mother, especially in its second arc, second act, but they're both kind of like horror films that never quite take off. It's like a horror film that fizzles out in its second stage, right? It's about to leave the atmosphere, and then that one just doesn't fire, and it lands and burns up in the mundane atmosphere. Do you have a lot more to say about this film, or
not a ton, honestly? It's definitely something I'm gonna have to watch again to understand really any of it. Because I guess I expected it to be a little more straightforward, like an adaptation or an Eternal Sunshine, right? Those are not super cryptic movies.
The other thing we didn't mention is, and we in our pre-podcast, you said that you didn't even realize, but this movie is, as far as I can tell, entirely shot in a 4:3 Lighthouse-esque, not quite as square as that framing, but old school TV framing, which a lot of people bitched about, and I don't get it. Like, it's like I'm living through the Philistine times of people being unhappy with letterboxing, like, oh, my TV's got black bars on, I don't like it. It's like
it's a creative choice at this point. Like, it didn't used to be. Now it is. Let me ask you this. So the only time I can remember maybe recalling the aspect ratio, because I'm notoriously bad at noticing this stuff, like when a Westworld or something switches aspect ratio, I don't notice. Rarely ever, unless I'm actively looking for it. I think the only time this doesn't display in the 4:3 aspect ratio is when the TV show or movie or whatever it is on.
One, yeah. That might be.
Is that part of the thematic like spectacle message? Like, this is somehow more real than the limited version of it that we get in life?
I do think, as I noticed every time they're out in the snow, I could see like whenever they're driving through the snowstorm or out in snowstorm, or there on at the Tasty Freeze or whatever the fuck the ice cream place was called, Frosty Town. Tulsi Town. Maybe that's what it was. I noticed that it was there, and I speculated because I did a lot of research on this meaning of this for the Lighthouse, and like I felt like probably they are going for this claustrophobic feeling. They are going for stuff that, especially when you're moving through their parents' house. I also noticed aspect ratio too, where when they're panning over to an empty room, or the shot is staying on an emptiness that people have left, like that whole kind of like, if you've ever gotten so into a video game that your character goes to peek around a corner and you try to like cheat the monitor, like
Sure.
that's going to work. I felt some of that, like the same way that when I'm watching Paranormal Activity or something, that I'm trying to like will the boundary of the screen to move so I can see what's about to jump out and scare me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what they're trying to get, like they're boxing you in, and get that feeling, but that's just speculative, because
Yeah.
I did read an interview with Charlie Kaufman, and he's pretty much like, I don't really want to explain this film. Uh,
Fair. That's fine.
yeah, it means what it means, and I shot it, and it's 2 hours and 12 minutes long, and there you go. Which, yeah, I actually admire that. But yeah, other than the aspect ratio, that's other. This isn't like a visual feast. There's a few noteworthy things, like I said, the La La Land style dance kind of fight that they have. That Tulsi Town commercial was kind of interesting, but mostly it's just bleak, gray, subdued landscapes and bleak, gray, subdued personalities.
And yeah, I mean, nothing is happening in the first like hour and a half of this movie. It's
Yeah.
it's a couple of car rides. It's a couple of, somewhat bizarre talking scenes, dinner with a family.
Uncomfortable dinner party.
But I found myself compelled throughout this entire thing.
Mhm.
Like I was, my attention was wrapped on this screen. I don't know how he does it, right? He's working with almost nothing here, and yet and there's a tension that I don't even realize I'm feeling until I kind of get so far down that well that I'm like, I sit back and go, oh God, I feel something here. I feel either terrible or this is like super captivating or something. But yeah, I never felt like it dragged at all, even though it was incredibly boring things were happening on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because that tension you're talking about is something you feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Like waiting for the
and
parents to come down the stairs. That's like 10 minutes of waiting and having like a back and forth about, are they going to come down? Like,
and they keep on building into a moment like there's an uncomfortable subject, and to change the tension, he gestures to the staircase and is like, oh, now here they are. And for 30 seconds, you watch the staircase uncomfortably with them, and they move on to something else that's even more uncomfortable, like what's going on in this basement. And yeah, like they kept on cutting the tension with another tense scene, only to not resolve that tension, and it keeps on like it's a waterfall, like one of those champagne deals where it's like all the champagne glasses you're pouring, it just keeps on overflowing to the next one and to the next one. You're at the bottom of that, like, Jesus Christ, resolve some of this tension. And I don't know the film ever does, because this film essentially kicks the can all the way to its conclusion, and
which seems like
then
the
leaves
point,
you
right?
with that.
Like
like
he's saying
it's
something about
unsatisfying.
life and doing the same.
And is your life like this? Maybe, like, that's the thing. It's like, do you want this kind of tension in your life on your deathbed? If so, keep kicking the can down till tomorrow. If not, maybe fucking pick up the can and do something with it.
Yeah, that is one of the other big themes, right? Is like indecision and
yes,
just kind of snowballing, and how things just like you blink and suddenly 10 years have passed and you're still in the same situation that you didn't want to be in the first place. And now what do you do about it? Do you sit there for another 10 years doing the same thing, or do you change it, and how? Yeah, that's very much like a big theme of this film.
Yeah, and I've like that's an epiphany I had about life, that like life really starts blurring past you when you get in a routine that never changes.
Yeah.
And I've been reflecting about it a lot this year, because I've been enforced into a routine that never, ever fucking changes. And this year has felt like a lifetime, and also like it's this blurred past. Like I was just thinking, Jesus Christ, Cecily's birthday was in February, and now I'm a month away from my son's birthday. What the fuck happened? But... And I've tried ever since I've had that epiphany to live my life with a lot of variety and changing and all these different challenges. And it's been like, man, I feel like my own fucking life is stuck in this 4:3 aspect ratio of late, claustrophobic closing on the sides. And
that's what I mean. Like, don't watch this right now. Don't watch it right
but
now.
on the other hand, it also, if you're not really white knuckling it, and because it also is, I thought, a pretty good meditation of what I'm feeling right now, and
Absolutely.
complimentary of that, or like lets you. It's kind of like going to an art museum and staring at a particularly intriguing piece for a long time. It's you let your mind wander a bit. You can meditate. It's similar to kind of like Ad Astra. I found myself
Hmm.
because a lot of times when I'm watching something, I get caught up in like, what the fuck am I going to say about this film? But in like with Ad Astra in this film, instead I found myself getting lost in reveries about how this is actually applies to kind of like my life and my situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, like obviously if you're in a bad way mentally or emotionally, don't take on something particularly challenging. But if you're, uh, I don't think anyone's doing well, but if you're not completely white knuckling and you got a little bit of wherewithal, I don't know, might be worth a meditation.
Sure.
That's all I got.
Same here.
I'm about to go freeze to death with my belly full of maggots, and see if I can get that goddamn car started so I can
Hmm.
pull out of this movie. All right. Well, next week we have something completely different. It's at the opposite end of examining the life unlived. This is the 2012 film Wolf of Wall Street, which is examining a life lived to excess. And we've got it's a saturated movie with color and personality, and we've got a lot to say about it. Hope you join us back next week for that. Until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.